Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Not only has Secretary Noem been busy filming propaganda ads, she's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars. In fact, Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called the Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Secretary Noem win her campaign to become the governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, her top policy advisor, has worked with the firm, and the company's CEO is married to Secretary Noem's chief spokesperson, Mrs. Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. They're stealing money from the American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you for calling this hearing. Since January, Donald Trump has used the full power of the federal government to attack Americans in cities across the country. In Donald Trump's America, you are at increased risk of experiencing militaristic operations in your home, increased risk of being subject to detainment by mass thugs and wannabe vigilantes, increased risk of suffering injuries due to reckless and illegal acts by rogue federal agents, increased risk of being deported to foreign nations even if you are an American citizen, and you're at an increased risk of being targeted by federal government for criticizing the president and his friends. Congressional Republicans have completely abandoned their Article I powers and have exchanged their responsibility to their constituents with fealty to the president. They have allowed the president to morph federal agencies into instruments of autocracy. And as a result, the president has been able to ignore federal law, disregard court orders, and implement the largest pay-for-play scheme in American history. The White House, well, what's left of it anyway, is literally up for sale. The federal courts have characterized this presidency as, quote, lawless. In fact, when ruling against illegal acts committed by the administration, a Republican-appointed federal judge stated, quote, the court cannot imagine how the public interest might be served by permitting federal officials to flaunt the very laws they have sworn to enforce. In a separate case where the administration was sued for unlawful acts, the judge, also a Republican appointee, stated, quote, allowing constitutional rights to be dependent upon the grace of the executive branch would be a dereliction of duty by this third and independent branch of government and would be against the public interest. But in another case, the court summed it up perfectly by declaring, quote, as is becoming far too common, we are confronted again with the efforts of the executive branch to set aside the rule of law in pursuit of its own goals. Judiciary Committee Republicans have been completely complicit in this corruption. But since they're so interested in restoring law and order, I have a couple of suggestions on where they can start. Number one, this is the President of the United States standing beside his best friend, Jeffrey Epstein. As we all know, Mr. Epstein is one of the most notorious sexual predators in American history. For 8 weeks, the Republicans on this committee have chosen to protect these two men instead of providing justice to Mr. Epstein's victims. Now the administration is panicking. First, they campaigned on releasing the Epstein files. Then AG Bondi and Associates did a photo op with the files, and she said, and I quote, the Epstein list is on my desk. Then somehow the Epstein list didn't exist. Then the Epstein files became a Democratic hoax. Now the president is supposedly supportive of releasing the files, even though he's currently ignoring a congressional subpoena to do so. Now the president is simply crashing out. And it's because he can't seem to explain his special decades-long relationship with one of the most prominent sexual predators in American history. It's already public that he's in the Epstein files, but his administration is hiding the context of his involvement, if any, with Mr. Epstein's horrific crimes. Now, this is Miss Ghislaine Maxwell. Miss Maxwell, who obviously helped Jeffrey Epstein traffic more than 1,000 women and girls, well, Donald Trump is now giving her special treatment while she's serving out her prison sentence. He won't even rule out giving her a pardon or commuting her sentence. I don't need to explain why pardoning sex traffickers wouldn't be restoring law and order. Now, this is Secretary of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. Not only has Secretary Noem been busy filming propaganda ads, She's also been busy cashing in on millions of taxpayer dollars. In fact, Secretary Noem has funneled millions of dollars to a company called the Strategy Group. The Strategy Group helped Secretary Noem win her campaign to become the governor of South Dakota. Corey Lewandowski, her top policy advisor, has worked with the firm. And the company's CEO is married to Secretary Noem's chief spokesperson, Mrs. Tricia McLaughlin. This is what corruption looks like. They're stealing money from the American people's pockets and depositing it into their bank accounts. Now we move on to yet somebody else. This is the so-called border czar, Tom Homan. Mr. Homan is on tape accepting $50,000 in cash bribes stuffed in a brown paper bag from an undercover FBI agent. Apparently, Mr. Homan accepted these bribes in exchange for awarding federal contracts to his friends. Trump's Department of Justice killed the investigation into Mr. Homan's crimes, and congressional Republicans didn't say a mumbling word. Lastly, this is insurrectionist and Nazi sympathizer Ed Martin. It appears that Mr. Martin is functioning as the Associate Deputy Attorney General, Pardon Attorney, Director of the Fake Weaponization Working Group, and Special Attorney for Mortgage Fraud. All that means is that Mr. Martin is Trump's lapdog, whom the president sends to initiate lawsuits against the president's perceived political opponents. This is what we call organized crime. They're breaking the law, often by stealing taxpayer dollars, covering up their crimes by ending and obstructing investigations, then prosecuting people who call out their unlawful behavior. And while the Republicans are encouraging this corruption, they're abandoning actual victims of violent crime and ignoring the Republican-led state's 21st century murder crisis. In September's appropriation markup, congressional Republicans proposed reducing the FBI staff by thousands of positions and underfunding the agency by more than $1 billion. They've proposed slashing resources from the ATF. They've proposed cutting grants for juvenile justice programs and hate crimes and eliminating the community violence intervention and prevention grants. They're literally defunding the police. So no matter what they say at today's hearing, congressional Republicans have proven that they are not investing in keeping American communities safe from violent crime. Mr. Chairman, I yield back. First, I have a unanimous consent request. I ask unanimous consent to enter into the record a report written by Chandler Hall titled Cities in Blue States Experiencing Larger Declines in Gun Violence in 2023.
Without objection.
Then I have another one. It is by Chandler Hall again, titled The Highest Rates of Gun Homicides Are in Rural Counties.
Without objection.
My next one is written by Jeff Asher, titled Trump Doesn't Have the Data to Back Up His Claims About Washington, D.C.
Without objection.
And my final one is written by Kylie Murdoch and Jim Kessler, titled The 21st Century Red State Murder Crisis.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. Before you go on, I have two UC requests. One is from the Council on Criminal Justice, which states, examining trends over a longer period, St. Louis has had a far larger reduction in some violent and property crimes than other large American cities. The homicide rate in St. Louis was 40% lower in the first half of this year than it was in the first half of the first year of the pandemic.
Without objection.
And then the second one is I ask unanimous consent for an article that was written by Stephanie Wiley titled How Profit Shapes the Bail Bond System, published by the Brennan
Without
Center.
objection.
Thank you.
Do you believe that the National Guard, the men and women in the Guard, are capable of being on those city streets and doing good and not doing harm, and that they're not just going to be warriors that are going out shooting people and beating them up? Mr. Mangual, yes or no answer?
Yes, I do.
Mr.
Yes.
Moran?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, so that puts that away. I thank you. I thank all of you. With that,
I have UCs.
I bet you do.
I mean, you asked different questions. I got answers. My first UC, I asked unanimous consent to enter into the record an article titled DOJ Cancels $500 million in Public Safety Grants, Cuts Officer Safety and Crime Prevention Programs, published by Police One on August 18th, 2020.
Without objection.
I also have one where it is entitled Public Safety Groups Face an Uncertain Future Months After Federal Grant Cuts, published by the National Public Radio.
Without objection.
I also have one that says Justice Department slashes essential services for crime victims, published by the Brennan Center.
Without objection.
I have one that says, let's see, this is by The Guardian. It's published March 27th, 2025. Trump cut 69 global programs tackling child labor and human trafficking.
Without objection.
I have another one that says, this is written by Michael Waldman, titled Trump Defunds Effective Crime Prevention Policies, published by the Brennan Center, July
Without
of
objection.
25. I have another one that says, it's by Nicole, I can't pronounce Nicole's last name, crime prevention efforts face setbacks after federal cuts.
Without objection.
I have another one that says, federal cuts to behavioral health will harm public safety, from September 23rd of 2025.
Without objection.
And my final one on this issue, so we can put this to rest. I ask unanimous consent. This is written by Nick Wilson, titled The Trump Administration's Budget Will Undermine ATF's Efforts to Prevent Violent Crime. This was published by the Center for American Progress on July 9th, 2025.
Without objection, I would remind everyone that those are, in sincerity, mostly left-wing publications, and I could come and put a lot of UCs in for publications that would disagree with that totally.
Okay.
So my point being, let me just finish my point, it's not going to put anything to rest, and you know that.
Well, but Mr. Chairman, I will ask, if you do have any UCs that say the opposite about these federal cuts, as if they didn't happen, please enter them into the record so that we can have it in the congressional record that these cuts were not made. I just would like it to be, I want us to have an accurate record.
Mr.
Not
Chairman,
necessarily the cuts, but the result of the cuts are two different things, where you're spending money and if you're spending money that's effective. I now recognize the ranking member, the ranking member of this committee, I do, Ms. Crockett.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. If we've learned anything this year, is that congressional Republicans are more interested in serving Donald Trump than they are in serving their constituents. Over the past 10 months, they have given away permanent tax cuts to the wealthiest people on earth, demolished half of the White House, pardoned violent insurrectionists, significantly driven up cost of living across the country, and then given themselves a taxpayer-funded 8-week vacation, all so that they could delay as long as possible Congress voting to release the Epstein files. And now they're trying to gaslight you into believing that you should trust them on crime policy. They want you to believe that living in a police state is a good or normal thing. They want you to be okay with having armed soldiers and federal agents monitor you as you shop for groceries or take your children to school. They want you to think that you won't be affected, but we've already seen Americans detained, arrested, injured, and some nearly killed because of this administration's reckless approach to handling crime. And they're doing all of this without acknowledging the fact that Republican-led states are experiencing a murder and crime and violent crime crisis, and they have for the last 2 decades. The Republicans' murder state rates were 33% higher than Democratic state murder rates in both 21 and 2022. In fact, over the past 22 years, the Republican state murder rates were nearly a quarter higher compared to states that are led by Democrats. Even when you remove Democratic cities and counties from the Republican states' data, their murder rate is still nearly a quarter higher than states run by Democrats. Ms. Levine, how long have you studied crime?
You're going to have me show my age. Is that nice?
It doesn't show on your face, honey. That's all that matters.
Let's just say about 3 decades.
Okay, very good. So would you agree that factors like poverty, lax gun laws, and a lack of public services can lead to higher crime rates?
Yes, I agree with that.
According to the Census Bureau, states with the highest poverty rates are disproportionately Republican governed and often have laxer gun laws and less public services. Wouldn't you agree that these factors are likely why Republican-led states have higher murder rates than Democratic states?
I would. In fact, I would like to lift up some research from one of our faculty members, Dr. Robert Apel. He recently conducted a study looking at the relationship between levels and quality of public assistance and crime, and found that there is the relationship in the expected direction. That is, lower public assistance, more crime, more recidivism.
Thank you so much for that. So not only are you likely to be a victim of violent crime in a Republican-led state, you're now less likely to receive victim assistance because of Republicans cutting resources for food, shelter, and transportation. This is what Donald Trump's America looks like. Never let a wannabe tyrant convince you that the only way for you to be safe is to live under a police state where he controls your day-to-day activities by means of military or armed federal agents. That's what we call a dictatorship. And I just want to be clear, because I appreciate what you just brought up, because I did serve as a public defender and a court-appointed attorney. So as we sat here, I remembered that one of the witnesses' opening statements, they mentioned the word why. And as Michael Jackson used to sing, why? We have not dealt with the why. We have not dealt with why crime happens. And if you understand the why, then maybe you can come to a conclusion. But as someone who has sat there with people that were too poor to be able to afford their own attorneys, I can tell you some whys. But what I am going to do is talk to you about why the idea that incarceration is the only thing that can fix anything, and the fact that we have two witnesses that are telling us that we need to go back to the '94 crime bill when we learned that all that did was drive up incarceration. It didn't drive down addiction, because addiction is actually an illness, but that's a whole other issue. And you can't incarcerate your way out of an illness, just like you can't incarcerate somebody that has cancer and believe that somehow they now will be cured. But I digress. What I will tell you is that we also know that the U.S. has the highest incarceration rate of any independent democracy on earth. Worse, every single state incarcerates more people per capita than most nations. In the global context, even progressive U.S. states like New York and Massachusetts appear to be extreme, just like Louisiana and Mississippi. In addition to that, the United States has the highest incarceration rate, the highest average firearms per 100 people, highest homicides per 100,000 people, and the lowest safety and securing rate of 12 countries in comparison. I had a 17-year-old that was charged with stealing food out of the concession stand at his high school. Unfortunately, in the state of Texas, at the age of 17, you are considered an adult. So what did they do? They decided to charge him with burglary of a habitation. He had an attorney that was not me when he went through this. They put him on felony probation. Ultimately, they revoked his probation because he was too poor to show up to his actual probation officer, as his mom was the one who was required to take off work so that she could take him in. I'm gonna wrap up, but this is really important for people to understand. At the end of the day, they ended up giving my kid the maximum punishment for less than $20 worth of candy that he stole out of the concession stand. Ultimately, I told them that it was a mistake to send him to prison. When he went to prison, he learned how to be a criminal. That's where he learned how to cook meth. The next time that I saw him, it was because he had committed a real crime. Ultimately, all that did was harm our communities. And I will be clear, this was a poor young man, but he was not black. So, and this was in rural Texas.
Time is
this
expired.
was East Texas.
Time
so
is
I want to
expired.
be smart about what we do with crime, and I want to make sure that
Time
we
is
are putting our
expired.
money in smart places. Thank you so much for being kind.
I thank the gentlewoman.